You are listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
What's up, Chiefs Kingdom? Hope everyone out there had a great and safe New Year's. I'm DJ Kissel. Appreciate Tucker Franklin and Brett Coleman for stepping in on Monday to handle KCSN Update as Matt Miller was stranded in Colorado, and I was coming back with the family from visiting friends down in Dallas. But Matt will join me tomorrow for his weekly Stock Up, Stock Down report. For those who might be new, this is KCSN Update, our daily Chiefs show and podcast here at KC Sports Network, presented by our good friends at DraftKings. Appreciate you for hanging out today and spending part of your day with us. Nate Taylor from The Athletic will join me in just a few minutes for our weekly conversation. But first, please hit that like and subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. You can also follow us on your favorite podcast platform by simply searching KCSN. And you can find all of our channels that way, covering all of your favorite Kansas City sports teams, not just the Chiefs. We also cover KU, K-State, and Mizzou. A lot going on there. But before we bring on Nate, here's a quick word from DraftKings. The fans, the tradition, the glory. There's nothing more thrilling than college football, and it all comes down to the national championship game happening on Monday. My go-to for betting is DraftKings Sportsbook, one of America's top-rated sportsbook apps. TCU and Georgia, that's the matchup, and it's basically the favorite against the underdog that's taken the college football landscape by storm this year. I've got to stay loyal to the Big 12 and root for TCU. And right now, new customers can bet just $5 on college football and get $200 in free bets instantly, win or lose. Plus, everyone can combine multiple bets for a bigger payout with DraftKings same game parlays. I love the app because it's easy to navigate and I can find the plays that I'm looking for easily and quickly. I love to bet simple on my same game parlays, the over under and pick a team. But I always struggle to take the under because I love action. I love scoring. I love not hoping some big play doesn't happen. But you can download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use code KCSN, and new customers bet just $5 on college football and get $200 in free bets instantly. That's code KCSN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. All right, let's welcome on Nate Taylor from The Athletic. Nate, going to be a little bit different style of a show, obviously, with what's going on across the NFL right now. And we will definitely get into the Damar Hamlin situation and kind of unpack as much as we know right now and just kind of get your thoughts on it. I don't want to say I'm excited or interested to hear your thoughts. You're a thoughtful person, and this will be a good conversation, I think, for us to kind of to work our way through what we all witnessed last night, because I think it kind of shook everybody in a different way, especially people that are around players and coaches and the guys who step between the white lines who play this game. But before we get to that, just how was your New Year's? How's the fam? How was the weekend?
New Year's was good, BJ. It was a bit odd to go to work the next day and cover a football game, but that operation went pretty smooth. My family's really good. Everybody's doing well. I hope that's the case for much of our audience. I don't know. It's just I already felt it was going to be an unusual week just because of the way New Year's fell on the NFL calendar and the likelihood with the Chiefs winning, Sunday, that they were probably going to play on Saturday. We've seen this before where ESPN gets 2 additional games on Saturday for Week 18. They chose the Chiefs last year for similar seeding implications. So, I'm kind of already thinking in that mode. Obviously, you have to rearrange with travel. In my case, the team's case, getting ready for obviously the regular season finale, which is now on Saturday. So you already kind of knew it was going to be an unusual week that would change the team's work schedule. They're obviously trying to prepare for their postseason run as well. And then, of course, one of the things that was really fascinating about the post game of the Chiefs' victory over the Broncos was everybody in the organization, whether it was, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Frank Clark, you go down the line. Obviously I talked to a few coaches who were basically going to block their work day on Monday in order to have time to sort of watch what occurred between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Buffalo Bills. Obviously that game had immense implications for the Chiefs. I think it's probably the most interesting probably most hyped game for Monday Night Football since 2018, when the Chiefs and Rams were each 9-1, I believe, at the time. And you knew both of those teams were obviously playoff and Super Bowl contenders. So this was obviously a similar case. This is now even in conference. It's the first real, I guess, matchup with Joe Burrow and Josh Allen on equal status in the league. So everybody in the organization basically worked as soon as they could Monday morning so that they could get Monday night off to just be football fans, as Patrick Mahomes said after the game. So you knew it was going to be an unusual week for all the things I just mentioned earlier, and then things go from unusual to just tragic. And that's, and we'll see how the league approaches everything else that's supposed to follow. One of my first thoughts this morning, BJ, was the next game on the NFL schedule is Chiefs Raiders on Saturday afternoon. And will we have a significant, medical update about Damar Hamlin between then and now? And so there's a lot of things obviously to tackle with. I'm happy to do it with you. But yeah, my New Year's was good, and then it just gets it's just a very sort of gloomy and very it's a difficult thing, I think, for everybody to process.
Yeah, everybody kind of, whether they were watching the game live or just kind of following, like myself, where I was putting my daughter to bed and just kind of like I had the game tracker up, just kind of following and then going back to social media and see what was going on. And you see that there was an injury and then a player went down, and then, this looks serious. And then it slowly, as you're following kind of on social, I wasn't watching the game live at that exact moment. And then it slowly started, there's an ambulance coming out, and it just kind of kept building. And it was like, holy cow, this is serious, the way the players are reacting. And then I flip on and it's at a commercial break, and they kept going back and it kept throwing to, commercials. And you knew, following on social from the beat writers who were there, that it wasn't just a normal injury. It wasn't just, a precautionary thing. And that, then they were talking about administering CPR out on the field, and you see the players, and there's so many different ways to discuss this. But my first thought is, a lot of the way that social media reacted, and initially it was kind of like a wake-up call for a lot of people that don't necessarily, I don't want this to come across the wrong way, but aren't around these guys. They don't humanize the players in the way that you're sitting there talking to these guys, and them at a personal level when things like this happen, that this has nothing to do with football. They know him, they know his family, they know his story, they know everything about him, and it completely changes everybody's perspective. And I think, and I hadn't read the whole thing yet because I just saw it getting promoted on my timeline, but Kevin Clark at The Ringer would be one of those people that he wrote something this morning that I think, based on what a lot of people I respect have been saying, is something worth reading and checking out. And he basically made the point that, this is going to change a lot about the way that the NFL is viewed for a lot of people, because the ugly side of it got put, at the forefront where everybody was watching and everyone was caught up into it in some kind of way.
So since you didn't watch it, BJ, live, I'll sort of walk people through it if they also didn't watch it live. The atmosphere is what you would expect. The Bengals are near midfield. I believe it's T. Higgins who makes the catch in the middle of the field, and obviously is tackled by Damar Hamlin. It's a perfect form tackle, given the leverage, and the thing that alerted me is how quickly his teammates on the Buffalo Bills, the guys who were on the field during the play, how quickly they went to their knee. Because normally it's the trainers who come out, it's maybe a coach or two, and then guys quickly are, realize that, hey, my teammate is seriously injured. And then they go to a knee. Guys basically went to a knee immediately. And I believe it was Joe Mixon who was the first player to probably recognize, when if people are willing to watch the replay of the incident, Joe Mixon is the first person to recognize what happens and then alerts the Buffalo Bills training staff. I think it was appropriate that ESPN didn't show CPR being administered, even though you know that there are hundreds of cameras in the stadium because it is a primetime game. But the fascinating part of all of this, beyond just the tragic nature of, as the NFL has said, as the Bills have said, a player whose heartbeat had to be restored. I have never heard that or witnessed that in an NFL game before Monday night. But there's so many emotions of tears, of sorrow, of just guys really shocked, that, what are we supposed to do? I think that's the question that pretty much was on display for everybody on the field. What are we supposed to do if we're not one of those first responders, if we're not, the trainers, if we're not the people immediately attending to Damar Hamlin? So if that's the case, like, what are we supposed to do? And the thing that I will try to explain to our audience now is football mostly continues unless there's something like this. And that's how rare last night was. Of course, it's in a primetime setting with millions of people watching, with 70,000 people in the stands who aren't really sure either, because they don't have the ability to like have a TV in front of them and have multiple camera angles. And obviously there's no replay that was shown, I believe, in the stadium. So with everything going on, the way the sport usually works is the game continues. And so there's this conflict. There's this issue of, do we continue the game? But also we're trying to figure out what is actually wrong with Damar Hamlin. And then once that became known through the rest of the Buffalo Bills, I think the Bills were wise and reasonable to inform the Bengals of the situation. And then it really became down to a coaching decision, which no coach, I don't believe, has really probably gone through in such a public manner, which is, what are we supposed to do is the question. None of that sounds like we need to be playing football right now. So the coaches with the players made the right and wise decision. I know people are going to criticize the NFL, and they are more than willing and reasonable in doing that. But I've seen I've seen ambulances on the field before. You can look this up. This is stuff that occurred in the 90s. And the game continues because that's the way the sport normally operates, which sounds bizarre even as I say it out loud. The game normally goes on. The sport is normally supposed to continue said action. So the detail that I think pulled at me emotionally is, yes, I know these players. Sometimes you get to know their wives or their girlfriends or their fiancés, or you get to see their children. And then, of course, I've interviewed parents for NFL players throughout my time, covering the Chiefs and covering, professional sports in general. The detail that really hung with me was the fact that the ambulance had to wait for Damar Hamlin's mother to get from the stands to the ambulance so that she could ride with her son to the University of Cincinnati's hospital, which thankfully is only 2 miles away, based on ESPN's reporting. So it's a conflict that the league has normalized, and yet it's a conflict that the sport inherently just that is inherent to the sport, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, I didn't
no.
I just in this particular instance, it felt like, because for people that have watched the replay, it didn't seem, I don't want to pretend to say the wrong thing. You got to be very careful how you say things, but it didn't seem like such a big hit that when it happened, it was even more scary because, like to your say, like it was just a regular tackle, stood up and then went down. And not to speculate on anything there, I know there was stuff floating around on social media about what could have
been,
happened.
From medical experts, but yes,
right, from people who were in this that obviously
right.
aren't there, but have some sort of information that people are curious about, like what could this have been? Because he stood right up after the tackle and then fell back down. But it's one thing if a player has, a back injury or something where an ambulance comes out and takes him out. It's another thing if CPR is being administered and he's fighting for his life. Now, the good news, if you're unfamiliar with what's going on, and this was put out by his marketing rep last night, Jordan Rooney, had said that his once he got to the hospital, that Damar's his vitals were back to normal, and they've put him to sleep with a breathing tube down his throat. They are currently running more tests, and that was as of last night, which at that time was good. He's in critical condition, but his vitals were back to normal, and then they put the breathing tube down to take some stress off, so his body doesn't have to,
correct. Yes. Manufacture
that energy,
manufacture in such a way that is, it's I mean,
but for that reason, there was no way that they could continue playing with a player fighting for his life as opposed to an ambulance coming out for some sort of injury. And I've never seen social media be so one-sided, in that it became very apparent. It took them a long time to cancel that game. And I'm going to talk out of probably both sides of my mouth, because I think I will be very critical of the NFL for, the players warming up and seeming like they were about to start the game back up.
But but again, BJ, that's the norm. That is the normal inherent, sort of like Ryan Shazier is the first player I thought of, and they played that game. They finished that game. It's you think about, I know you're going to mention the Joe Burrow warming up, throwing footballs that has been televised. And I know we're probably going to get to the Troy Vincent stuff. The one other thing that I thought was a real, illustration of this conflict, of this inherent conflict, is, Sean McDermott getting the guys, to circle around on a knee and say a prayer for Damar Hamlin, which I thought was so admirable, and so caring, and just a loving gesture, that you can do, as you said, for a player who's, a 24-year-old man who's, had to have his heartbeat restored. And then Stephon Diggs, one of the leaders of the team, wants to motivate the guys because he inherently believes they're gonna continue the game. It's a thought that really he hasn't totally come to grips yet, that you can see on television. I mean, it's heartbreaking in a sense, because he's trying to go through what would happen if his teammate was Ryan Shazier, or if his teammate had a torn ACL. But this isn't that. And yet he still feels the need to, we have to play as if it is our last play, and we have to play as if we are obviously in honor of Damar Hamlin. And then an hour later, ESPN shows him, I believe, getting out of an Uber to see Damar in the hospital. It's a juxtaposition that is so rare and unusual that, the sport in and of itself is criticized. Not, the league obviously benefits and profits off of it the most, off of the actual creation of the sport. But this is how the sport's been functioning for over a century. And, again, applaud the healthcare workers, the first responders, and then I think the players and the coaches for at least taking enough of a breath to realize this isn't normal, and we can't move forward, because, again, what are we supposed to do? I think is the overall question that they kept asking themselves last night.
Yeah, there was reported last night, multiple places, that each team was going to be given 5 minutes to warm up, and that's when they were showing Joe Burrow playing catch on the sideline. Now, the NFL was criticized rightfully, if that's true. This is all now being kind of changed and the story's kind of changing. You don't really know. It depends what you want to believe. But now Troy Vincent of the NFL has come out and said that that wasn't the case and they weren't talking about restarting that game, even though we saw players warming up on the sideline after they were meeting with the coaches. So unless the players were just doing that on their own, it's going to be one of them. I'm sure that story is going to come out. It's secondary to everything else, but there were a lot of people very critical of the NFL, rightfully so, if there was any thought to getting that game started back up. But Troy Vincent has come out today and said that that was not the case. And my only, earlier I said I was going to talk out of both sides of my mouth, my only hope with the way that the NFL was handling in that moment is that it took so long, because there are a lot of different organizations. You have to call the NFLPA. There are a lot of calls that have to be made and conversations that had to be had simultaneously, while talking to the family, talking to the Bills, making sure that the medical stuff is that everybody's taken care of in that way, and logistically just doing a lot of different things. That hopefully that's why it took so long, because a lot of conversations had to take place. But I saw a lot of people very critical that the game just wasn't canceled immediately. But to your point, that's not really the precedent. And I know that people would put out screenshots of the NFL rulebook that in these cases, it is 100% on Roger Goodell and the NFL to step in and make that decision to cancel a game, to end it early, postpone it, whatever the decision was going to be. It did seem like it took a while. And based on the way the players were reacting on the sideline after the coaches meeting, is that it felt like they were about to start playing again, which just sent social media into a frenzy of what in the world are they doing?
Troy Vincent has to say what he said this morning. I want to make that clear. He has to say it. Now, is it accurate? No. Like, my eyes saw guys warming up, because again, that's what the sport largely does. In these cases, when anyone is injured, the game usually continues. Like, that's a fact. So he has to say that, even though that's totally inaccurate. Being the commissioner is really hard.
Yeah.
But this is where leadership is most valuable. If it's a logistical issue, if it's how are we going to transport this individual? How are we going to transport Damar Hamlin? How are we going to give him the most pristine care possible in this situation? If it's an idea of, okay, what is the message that we tell the players, the coaches? Do the Bills go home, which is what they did late last night? Do they stay in Cincinnati? If so, what are those, sort of immediate emergency sort of accommodations? Like, there's a ton of questions, and then you have to prioritize what is most important. And again, this is where leadership is most supreme and valuable. And again, there's really no precedent for this to. I mean, yes, there's rule books. I always love these conversations where there's rule books, there's procedures, there's things in place, and then you actually have to do them. And it's like, well, we had something, but we couldn't foresee this. And this is one of those moments where you just can't foresee a player who had to have his heartbeat restored. And I think that's what I'm going to think about, for the rest of the day. It's just his heartbeat had to be restored by medical experts on a football field. That is not just shocking, but it's just deeply heartbreaking. So the NFL will do its best, I think, to try to damage control to some sense from a communication standpoint. But also, it's totally fair to criticize the NFL because we all have eyes, and because a message got relayed to Troy Aikman and to Joe Buck, and they I won't say regurgitated that message, but obviously, gave it to everyone as again, in these situations, most times players have 5 to 10 minutes to warm up. This has been a 5-minute. We have been told that what is next is a 5-minute warm up, and then of course, like you said, BJ, social media, responds accordingly, which is something I also don't say often is social media as a whole responds accordingly. But
we'll get to that in a second.
But yeah, like it's
we saw the good side of social media as well,
right? And at my point, I'm just, you know, as a reporter, I'm just trying to see how my fellow colleagues are handling all this. Who's reporting? You know, who's trying to give accurate information? How is, you know? Yeah, I mean, just how is Damar Hamlin doing? And the idea of just the players. The players having to go through that. I mean, it brings its own uniqueness of trauma, and it's something that I don't think is going to go away anytime soon. Even though we all are led to believe that the season is going to continue in some shape or form over the next few days.
I think it's easy to criticize the NFL, especially in situations like this where they almost got it wrong, or they got it just wrong enough before they fixed it once the message was already out that they had thought about restarting this game. I don't think that's even within question. I think you're right in that, you know, Troy Vincent didn't have a choice. He had to come out and say they weren't going to restart the game. No one will know except for the people that were on that field of what was being discussed. But the other side of this in criticizing the NFL is also, you know, understanding. And I saw Aaron Borgman, who spent 12 years on the sidelines with the Eagles and the Chiefs, tweeted out, and he is very passionate about this, and for good reason. And it's highlighted with situations like last night that outside of being in a hospital, there's not a better place for something like this to happen based on having the people around you to be able to give CPR and have these medical professionals around you. And that we don't talk about the athletic training staff, Rick Burkholder and his staff, and how they are trained, and how the other doctors and people are on the sideline that are there on behalf of the NFL are there for these reasons, that you don't want them there. You don't need that you don't want to need that expertise on the sideline, but, you know, very easily could have saved his life based on, you know, who they had down there. And that's another angle to this that will be discussed more at length as we kind of work our way through, and obviously making sure that he's going to be okay, and hopefully getting that news, you know, sooner rather than later as we all kind of wait for it. But, you know, the other side that we saw with social media last night was, you know, his, you know, a charity toy drive that he did, you know, Damar Hamlin did 2 years ago, that he ran. The GoFundMe, the link was still active, and people found it. They promoted it. I saw it getting shared a couple of times on social media. I was just refreshing, you know, my Twitter page, like all of us, I'm sure were, and seeing that it gets tweeted out. And the original goal was $2,500. I saw it. I think the first time I saw it was 14,000, but somebody said that they had saw it like 8,000. But right now it's over $3.8 million with the amount of people that have shared it. And it's every national reporter, and even GoFundMe tweeted out, and his marketing rep said, this is the one, you know, this is the one to support, you know, his foundation. And it just shows you that for all the negative comments and the negative stuff that you see on social media a lot, that's kind of the majority of it, to be honest, there's a lot more good out there than there is anything else. And when things like this happen, and it's obviously a tragic situation, but you get to, I kept refreshing the GoFundMe because I just needed the reassurance that there's so many good people out there that from all different fan bases that just, you know, have empathy, and, you know, we're all human, and, you know, we love this sport. We love to support this sport. I mean, obviously we talk about it every week, every day. We've built our, you know, professional lives around it. And when things like this happen, it's nice just to know that people can step back and be humans. And it's a nice reminder that, you know, the guys who step on between the white lines, they're doing something, and they're putting themselves at risk. And it was a nice display of humanity for me. And that's why I kept tweeting it, kept supporting it, because there was so many things being amplified about certain national people saying some really stupid things that I got tired of seeing on my timeline. So, you know what, I'm going to fill my timeline up with the positives, a lot of, you know, the recaps of Damar Hamlin at his, you know, doing the toy drive around Christmas time, and all the good things that he was doing. That's the stuff you wanted to see on your timeline. And it was a nice reminder that people come together in times like this.
Yeah, for sure. I think I was, it was pretty silent in our house for much of last night. And, emotionally, I was just, you know, at one point, reporters that said the hospital wanted to give a statement or to have some form of a press conference. And then when that decision was made that they weren't going to have one, I was just sort of emotionally spent. But I did see your retweets. I thought that was very touching. I mean, obviously, um, people are people are more impressive than we give them credit for a lot of times, even in
Yeah.
group settings. And this is the best that we could do beyond just praying for him. And I know everyone in our house did for Damar, and we'll continue to do that. It's just it's just again it's really heartbreaking. It's the word that I keep sort of coming back to.
And I want to move forward a little bit with this conversation, and I want to be very respectful as how we do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I have no idea how the NFL can handle this going forward if there's not any kind of an update. And what I mean by that is that there were playoff implications. There are playoff implications about
Mm-hmm.
that game, and to change anything as far as just move everything down a week, it in theory it sounds like that's a very easy solution, but logistically, you don't know if that's possible. You don't know if the stadiums across the NFL and all the games can just be simply moved down a week with other things that are scheduled and all the different, just logistical things that go into that. I like what you said earlier regarding, there's no play. There could be rules in place on how to handle things like
Mm-hmm.
this, but I don't know how to feel knowing that if they can't move those games and they don't replay that game and they just end it in a tie, that would mean the Chiefs would be the number one seed. And that's not really how, who's going to be comfortable with that scenario?
Yeah, I haven't thought about it a ton. I know some people have asked me on Twitter, and I obviously I don't have the answer. And
It's not going to be a take. It's more just an
yeah,
open discussion about
I'm thinking
what Chiefs fans shouldn't feel comfortable about
no,
that. And so I,
yeah,
it'd be unprecedented. I don't know.
yeah,
Just,
yeah. I mean,
yeah.
again, one of the stranger parts of all this is we did go through a pandemic season where games were moved to
Mm-hmm.
certain dates that were obviously abnormal to a usual schedule. So we have seen that. I don't know if they can. This was some part of the CBA discussions a few years ago, but just like as they were trying to adjust throughout the I guess more heightened part of the pandemic, it's uh my understanding of it is that the game is postponed, right? So like
Yeah.
there's a some form of again wanting to continue it. Obviously, Buffalo, the Bills are in their hometown. They're in Buffalo. They're not in
Right.
Cincinnati. The game is to be played in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, if this was a weather issue, then yes, you could move it to a neutral site. If this was a pandemic thing, you can, sort of move the game around, have a skeleton operations crew, which I don't think people think about a ton. It's just like, hey, there has to be people to turn the lights on and
Right.
have the trucks
Yeah.
ready and trying to broadcast this thing. And are there going to be fans? Well, how many? How are we going to handle all the procedural things that it takes to have a game before, during, and after. I
Right.
I wonder, and this is me just sort of thinking in this moment right now, but I wonder uh, for the traumatic event that those players went through. I wonder if the league will give them the week off, and that there will be
Mm-hmm.
some level of. I mean, it's just tough. I mean, goodness gracious, it's sort of devastating. But yeah, I don't know if it's reasonable, or I don't think it is, to ask the players to play anytime
Right.
soon. But again, I also recognize that the schedule tells me that the next game is, oddly enough, Chiefs Raiders at 3:30 Eastern time on Saturday on ESPN. I would assume either that game included the Joe Buck Troy Aikman crew, or they'll be at the Tennessee Jacksonville game. But it's
in a perfect world that obviously Damar Hamlin, we get good news over him the next couple of days.
Yeah.
And I think if logistically it could work, just move everything across the NFL just down a week.
Yeah.
Just give everybody a week off, which we should have said from the beginning. That's the best case scenario. Damar Hamlin's okay. The Bills, they can work through the trauma. Even he comes back okay. It's not like the players who are on that field aren't still going to have things they have to work through. Like that's going to follow them and be
it's going to alter a lot of careers.
Yes. The way that people look at the game and hopefully the way that fans kind of approach the guys who step on the field, who do this every week, and humanizing them in that kind of way. But outside of, I can't imagine any team, any owner, any GM, head coach across the league that their season gets moved down a week would have an issue with that. It's the logistics of, every team then kind of, whether they're home or away, kind of working through all of the changes. That's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts to obviously putting on an NFL game, and to move those all down a week is a huge lift. But, if there's a reason to do it, it's this one. It's something like this. And the fact that there are implications of, bye weeks that could be built into what's going on, but you don't know who that's going to be because the game did matter in that kind of way. It's going to be interesting to see how that part of it happens after we get the good news that Damar Hamlin is improving and doing okay, which we're all kind of waiting on right now. But I don't envy the position that Roger Goodell is in and having to make a decision. And I think from what the NFL has said is they aren't going to make any decision until there's more information about how Damar Hamlin is doing, which I think is the right call after some reportedly incorrect decisions or, just problems that they created for themselves last night by not handling it the right way from the very beginning.
If you move everything back a week, then the Super Bowl would be after Valentine's Day. And of course there's, I know we don't have a ton of time left, BJ, but I do want to remind people that like the sport is a multi-billion-dollar industry that is in concert with the television industry. So that's how the schedule gets made, essentially. It's like, does it fit TV? So if you move everything back a week, I'm sure there's mechanisms for them to do that. Again, this would more likely be a weather thing or a pandemic thing or some catastrophe that, again, is sort of unforeseen, like 9/11. That is something that people have sort of mentioned earlier. It's just the players didn't feel comfortable playing after playing immediately the Sunday after 9/11, which I believe was on a Tuesday. So there have been cases where that has happened before. There are usually 2 weeks between the championship games and the Super Bowl. In rare past events, they have condensed that to a 1 week lead up to the Super Bowl instead of 2 weeks. So that is also something to be mindful as well. So I'm just doing my best to give options as I understand it, as I understand how the league is structured from a regular season, postseason scheduling part of the business, because it is a business. And but yeah, I think they have options is what we're ultimately trying to I think explain to the audience. Is like the league has options. They aren't constricted to just one particular. Hey, if the league decides that they're gonna move all these games, 1 more week, like you suggested, BJ, I won't be surprised by that. And if that's the case, then that's one of the options that they have. But there's several for them to take, and they don't have to rush this. As I think the point that you're making, that I totally agree with. They don't have to rush because they have multiple options.
Yeah, I think no matter what they do, they will be criticized, and I hope that all of us and everyone, and this is wishful thinking, but understands that whatever decision they make, whatever it may or may not have hurt your team or whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, this is about a young man that and a lot of people that were on that football field that are going to be changed forever in a lot of different ways, because there are a lot of people that covered the NFL for a very long time that had never seen anything like what we saw last night. And it's going to, like, to the point when I brought up at the beginning of the show that Kevin Clark from The Ringer said this is going to change football in some ways. We might not know exactly how for a while, but it's definitely going to change things for anybody that was around it, especially for the people who were there. So praying for them, and appreciate everybody for listening. I know it was a much different kind of episode. We're going to end it right here. We're going to talk about a couple other things. Just don't think that's right at this point. But Nate, man, appreciate you for hopping on and talking through this. Appreciate everybody for listening, and hopefully we get great news here very soon on Damar Hamlin and what he and his family are going through, in the entire Buffalo Bills organization. And also the Bengals and the players for all of that. I think, T. Higgins, there was reports last night of how shook up he was after the game as being the one who was involved in the play that ultimately led to this situation happening. So anything else before we end this one, Nate?
No, I think it's excellent, and I would applaud the fans as well. There's several of them who made the short journey from Paycor Stadium to the University of Cincinnati's hospital. I have immense respect for them to see, like you said, the human being beyond the shoulder pads, the jersey, the helmet.
Yeah.
Fans, this is why I enjoy my job and the duty that it, I guess is upon us. But, we are the connector oftentimes between fans and players that they can't totally recognize because they are watching from a distance, and guys are in, equipment to protect themselves. So for those fans to make the decision to, pay respects, to send prayers, to be supportive to the players who are obviously at the hospital before the Buffalo Bills obviously flew back to Buffalo last night. I just want to give them I just want to commend them, I guess is probably the best word to say, just for fans to understand that, this is something that, we all as human beings take for granted, and to be aware and acknowledging that, and obviously be more thoughtful about Damar's health above everything else is truly commendable. So for fans to be willing to talk to reporters, for fans to share their vantage point, for fans to, again, keep Damar as their biggest thoughts and, and obviously their prayers. It's just, again, people are better than we like to give people credit for.
And we'll end on that note. And again, if you listen to this and aren't familiar or haven't seen it yet, we've shared it on our social media platforms. The link to the Chasing M's Foundation Community Toy Drive that Damar Hamlin had put together a couple years ago when it was reported he was still in college when he put this together, and raising money to buy toys for kids for Christmas, is just shy of $4 million right now, with an initial goal of $2,500. And again, it was from a couple weeks ago. There is an update on the page that this is now for his foundation and to help with what he's going through right now. So if you list this and you feel compelled or called to help in some kind of way, this is the only fundraiser or GoFundMe or campaign type thing that is directly tied to the Hamlin family. So you can find that on our social media. Again, last night I saw it at $14,000, and 18 hours later, whatever, it's just shy of 4 million, which, Nate, to your point, shows a lot more good out there than anything else. So we appreciate everybody for listening to this. Hug your loved ones, show people you care about them, and understand This sport that we love so much, what these guys put on the line to go out there and play. This is the other side of it that we don't always like to admit that's there, but the guys that step on the field know it. And again, praying for Damar Hamlin and his family, and hopefully we get good news soon. Appreciate all you for listening. We'll see you next time.